In 2025, a striking 45% of millennials reported uncertainty about whether Jesus was a real historical figure, even as historians from every background maintain near-unanimous agreement that he lived in first-century Judea. Among experts, two events, his baptism by John the Baptist and his crucifixion under Pontius Pilate, stand out as the details subject to almost universal assent. This distinction between the historical Jesus and the Christ of faith is central to academic discussion. We will look closely at the latest archaeological discoveries from Israel, examine the most recent historical surveys, and review the evidence that leads scholars, regardless of religious belief, to their consensus. Yet, the gap between expert knowledge and public belief continues to widen, raising questions about how information spreads and why skepticism has grown so dramatically in the digital age. The digital age doubt epidemic. Online platforms have become the primary arena where questions about Jesus' historical reality are debated, and this has transformed the nature of public skepticism. The 2025 Pew Research Center study found that among younger generations, doubt about Jesus' existence has surged in parallel with the spread of misinformation in other areas like climate change and vaccines. Dr. Leah Goldman at Harvard Divinity School describes this as a collapse of historical literacy fueled by social media algorithms that reward controversy and sensationalism over careful analysis. According to her, platforms reward content questioning established facts with engagement, and the data supports her view. Social media algorithms are designed to maximize engagement, not accuracy. As a result, fringe theories about Jesus' existence are amplified far beyond their actual scholarly support. The Stanford study from 2024 offers a stark illustration. Users who watch a single video questioning Jesus' existence are 80% more likely to be recommended similar mythicist content within 3 clicks compared to balanced, evidence-based scholarship. This rapid feedback loop means that anyone with a passing curiosity can quickly find themselves immersed in a stream of videos or posts that challenge the historical consensus, regardless of the quality or credibility of the sources. This environment has made younger users especially susceptible to doubt. Pew's 2025 data shows that over half of respondents aged 18 to 24 expressed some level of skepticism about whether Jesus was a real person. The trend isn't driven by new discoveries or revelations, but by the way digital platforms structure the information people see. Content that questions established facts, whether about Jesus, vaccines, or climate change, spreads more rapidly and widely than sober, nuanced explanations. The Cambridge study on social media engagement found that across 6 major historical figures, fringe theories outperformed fact-based content by a ratio of 3-to-1 in shares and comments. The case of Jesus stands out because of the sheer scale of public interest. Billions of people have cultural, religious, or ideological reasons to care about the question, so any viral claim, no matter how unfounded, can reach an enormous audience. This transforms what is, in academic circles, a settled question into a battleground for competing narratives. Distrust in academic institutions compounds the problem. The 2025 Edelman Trust Barometer reports only 36% of Gen Z respondents trust academic experts on historical matters, compared to 68% of boomers. According to Dr. Raj Patel, a media psychologist at MIT, emotionally charged and visually striking content, such as a viral video claiming Jesus was invented, tends to stick in people's minds more than dense academic articles or archaeological reports. This effect is magnified on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, where short-form videos dominate and context is often lost. Accessibility also plays a role. Most academic research on Jesus is published for specialists and rarely makes its way into mainstream digital spaces. In contrast, simplified narratives like Jesus didn't exist are easily packaged into 60-second clips. The 2025 UNESCO report notes that 78% of social media users under 30 encounter historical claims through these short-form platforms, where sources are rarely cited and critical engagement is minimal. Only 12% of users fact-check viral historical claims before sharing, allowing misinformation to circulate unchecked. Some academic groups have tried to counter this trend. The Society of Biblical Literature, for example, launched a digital campaign in 2024 to produce accessible, evidence-based content addressing common misconceptions. Early results show these efforts reach only a small portion of the audience drawn to more sensational claims, echoing patterns seen in public health communication. As Dr. Goldman observes, you can't fact-check your way out of an algorithm optimized for outrage. One point often lost in these debates is the nature of historical evidence. While it's true that we lack contemporary Roman records explicitly naming Jesus, historians widely accept Tacitus's Annals as one of the earliest non-Christian references to him. The authenticity of this passage is supported by most scholars, despite minor debates over wording. This kind of evidence is more substantial than what exists for many ancient figures. For example, Pontius Pilate's existence was once doubted until the 1961 discovery of the Pilate stone, a single archaeological find that settled the question for historians. As the digital age continues to reshape how people encounter history, the challenge remains. How can credible evidence compete with viral doubt? The answer, for many, lies in the physical traces left behind, evidence that can be examined, tested, and debated, offering something solid in a landscape often dominated by speculation. Archaeology's smoking guns. Among the most persuasive developments in recent years are two archaeological discoveries that have shifted the conversation about the historical Jesus from speculation toward physical corroboration. The first is the 2024 excavation of the first-century synagogue at Magdala on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. Carbon dating confirms the structure's construction between 30 and 40 CE, placing it squarely in the time frame of Jesus' ministry. This synagogue is notable not only for its age, but also for its features. Stone benches arranged along the walls, mosaic floors, and a carved limestone block known as the Magdala Stone. The stone's reliefs depict a menorah and what appears to be a schematic representation of the Jerusalem temple, offering rare insight into Jewish religious life in Galilee. Archaeologists point out that Magdala's synagogue is the best preserved example from the period and closely matches descriptions of the teaching sites mentioned in the Gospels. The discovery supports the idea that synagogues were already established gathering places for prayer and instruction in Galilee, providing a historically plausible setting for Jesus' public activity. The second major find is the James Ossuary, a limestone bone box inscribed in Aramaic with the words James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. Since its emergence in 2002, the ossuary has been the subject of intense debate, with skeptics questioning both the authenticity of the inscription and the likelihood that it refers to the New Testament figures. In 2025, however, a new round of multispectral imaging and chemical analysis provided strong evidence that the patina inside the inscription is consistent with the rest of the box and shows no signs of modern alteration. Paleographic experts confirmed that the letter forms match other known ossuary inscriptions from first-century Judea. While the name Jesus was common at the time, the combination of James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, is rare and aligns with early Christian references to Jesus' family. Although not definitive proof of Jesus' existence, the ossuary offers material evidence that closely matches the relationships described in early Christian texts. These discoveries do not stand alone. They fit into a broader pattern of archaeological findings that reinforce the context described in the Gospels. The Magdala Synagogue demonstrates the existence of Jewish communal life and religious practice in Galilee during Jesus' lifetime, while the James Ossuary provides a tangible link to the familial network at the heart of the early Christian movement. Together, they anchor the narrative in the physical world, moving the discussion beyond abstract debate. It is important to note that archaeology rarely provides direct evidence for the lives of specific individuals from antiquity, especially those who were not political leaders or wealthy elites. In Jesus' case, the absence of personal writings or monuments is typical for itinerant preachers of the era. Instead, what emerges is a growing convergence between the material record and the textual accounts preserved in the Gospels. Each new find, when properly dated and authenticated, narrows the gap between the world described in early Christian sources and the physical reality of first-century Judea. While these archaeological smoking guns offer strong circumstantial support, historians also look for independent verification from outside the Christian tradition. Roman records, Jewish historical writings, and other non-Christian sources play a crucial role in corroborating the basic outlines of Jesus' life and the emergence of his followers. This external evidence, examined alongside the archaeological record, provides a more complete picture of what can be known about Jesus of Nazareth. Non-Christian sources re-examined. Turning to the testimony of ancient non-Christian writers, several independent sources provide important context for the historical Jesus. Among these, the Roman historian Tacitus stands out. Writing in the early 2nd century, Tacitus refers in his Annals to Christus, who suffered execution under Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. Tacitus's account is widely regarded as authentic by scholars, especially since he shows no sympathy for Christians and writes as an outsider to their movement. The details he records, linking Jesus' death to Pilate and Tiberius, and noting the presence of Christians in Rome, align closely with what is known from other historical records. Tacitus's reliability as a Roman senator and his clear disdain for the group make it unlikely he would simply repeat Christian claims without verification. This passage offers a rare instance of a Roman official acknowledging Jesus' execution and the early growth of his followers. Jewish historian Josephus also provides valuable references. In his Antiquities of the Jews, written near the end of the 1st century, Josephus mentions Jesus twice. The shorter passage in Book 20 describes James as the brother of Jesus, who is called Christ, a reference most scholars accept as authentic and untouched by later Christian editors. The longer passage, known as the Testimonium Flavianum in Book 18, has likely been altered by Christian scribes, but scholarly consensus holds that it contains a genuine core reference to Jesus' execution under Pilate and the existence of his followers. Recent textual analysis supports the idea that while some phrases may have been added, Josephus originally included a brief, neutral mention of Jesus as a historical figure. Together, these two references from Josephus, a well-placed Jewish observer, provide independent support for Jesus' existence from outside Christian circles. Other non-Christian sources, while less direct, reinforce the picture of Jesus as a known figure in 1st century Judea. The Syrian philosopher Mara bar Serapion, writing to his son sometime after 70 CE, refers to the execution of the wise king of the Jews whose teachings lived on after his death. Modern analysis of the letter's language and dating supports its authenticity, and the way Jesus is described, living on through wisdom rather than resurrection, suggests a non-Christian perspective. Scholars note that King of the Jews was not a Christian title, further distancing the text from later doctrinal concerns. Suetonius, another Roman historian, briefly notes that disturbances among Jews in Rome under Claudius were caused by someone named Chrestus. While scholars debate the exact meaning, most agree this is likely a reference to Jesus and the presence of his followers in Rome by the mid-1st century. The mention is brief but significant, confirming that Roman authorities recognized tensions connected to the early Christian movement during this period. Pliny the Younger's correspondence with Emperor Trajan from the early 2nd century provides additional evidence. Pliny describes interrogating Christians in Bithynia and notes their worship of Christus as a god, documenting the movement's spread and distinct beliefs. Archaeological finds from the region corroborate the administrative reality Pliny describes, showing Roman officials encountered Christians before Christian texts became widespread. References in the Babylonian Talmud, though polemical and written centuries later, contain details about the execution of Yeshu that align with Roman-era legal practices. Comparative studies have shown that the trial procedures and methods of execution described match what is known from 1st century Judea, suggesting these traditions preserve some genuine historical memory, even if filtered through later controversy. Collectively, these non-Christian sources do not provide exhaustive biographies. Instead, they offer a pattern of independent references. Jesus is mentioned as a real individual executed under Roman authority and quickly associated with a movement that spread beyond Judea. Hostile or indifferent writers, Roman, Jewish, and Syrian, do not question his existence, but focus on interpreting or challenging the significance of his life and followers. This convergence of evidence from diverse perspectives is a key reason why historians consider Jesus' existence far more certain than that of many other ancient figures. Debate over the details of Jesus' life continues, but the fact of his existence is not seriously contested among specialists. Instead, the question has shifted to how we identify references to Jesus in ancient records, especially given the arguments about name frequency and the challenge of distinguishing one Jesus from another in historical texts. The name frequency fallacy. A common objection raised by skeptic centers on the idea that Jesus' name was simply too widespread in first-century Judea to allow historians to reliably identify any one individual in the records. This line of argument, often called the name frequency fallacy, claims that with so many men named Yeshua, Jesus, original Hebrew name, appearing in ancient documents, it's impossible to distinguish the Jesus of Nazareth from the crowd. However, recent research challenges this assumption with a more precise look at the data. A comprehensive 2025 analysis of over 21,000 first-century names from ossuary inscriptions, legal documents, and census records found that Yeshua appeared in just 0.3% of the population. For comparison, names like Simon and Joseph were far more common, occurring as much as 15 times more frequently. This finding reframes the discussion. While Yeshua was not a rare name, it wasn't as prevalent as previously believed, and its occurrence becomes far more meaningful when additional identifying details are considered. Modern onomastic studies, research focused on the history and frequency of names, show that references to Jesus in the historical record are uniquely clustered. Statistical models reveal that among the men named Yeshua, only one is consistently associated with Nazareth, with a brother named James, a father named Joseph, and a reputation for preaching. No other individual in the surviving sources matches this combination of identifiers. Dr. Aaron Petrovich of Tel Aviv University highlights this point, noting that the convergence of name, location, and familial ties creates what he calls an identifiable fingerprint. According to his team's 2025 study, the odds of another Yeshua matching all these details at the same time and place are less than 1 in 1,000. The specificity of the Nazareth connection further narrows the field. Ancient texts reference just a handful of Yeshua's linked to Nazareth, and only 2 are associated with a brother named James, one being the Jesus of the Gospels, the other a minor rebel leader mentioned by Josephus decades later. The difference in timelines and activities makes confusion between the 2 unlikely. Regional naming patterns also help clarify the picture, since Galilean communities like Nazareth use certain names differently than those in Judea or Jerusalem. Epigraphic evidence supports this view. The James Ossuary, a first-century bone box, inscribed James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus, matches both the familial relationships and the period described in Christian and non-Christian sources. Paleographic analysis confirms the inscription's authenticity and its alignment with other first-century Judean artifacts. This material link, combined with textual references in Paul's letters, written within a generation of Jesus' death, provides a solid chain of evidence connecting the name to a specific individual. Some critics argue that the use of common names across different document types still complicates identification. Yet, historians routinely overcome this challenge by cross-referencing multiple details. The case of Pontius Pilate is instructive. His existence was once questioned due to the name's appearance in various sources, but the discovery of the Pilate stone, dated to 26 to 36 CE, confirmed his historical role. The same approach applied to Jesus produces a stronger case than for many other ancient figures. The timing of references also matters. Mentions of Jesus in Josephus and Tacitus appear within decades of his death, well within living memory of the events. This proximity stands in contrast to legendary figures whose first appearances in literature typically come centuries after their supposed lifetimes. The short gap between Jesus' life and the earliest written accounts reduces the likelihood of complete fabrication or mistaken identity. Further analysis of name patterns among Jesus' closest followers adds another layer of specificity. Names like Peter, Andrew, and Philip were far less common than Yeshua, making the particular mix of names in the gospel narrative statistically unusual. This supports the argument that these accounts reflect real individuals rather than later invention. Advances in digital mapping and database technology now allow researchers to plot the geographic distribution of first-century names across ancient Israel. A recent project at the University of Haifa mapped every documented Yeshua inscription and found the highest concentrations in Galilee, aligning with the areas described in the Gospels. This spatial correlation reinforces the reliability of the historical record. Ultimately, the name frequency fallacy rests on outdated assumptions. Early scholars lacked the comprehensive databases and statistical tools now available, leading to overestimates of how common certain names were. Modern research demonstrates that when all the evidence is considered, name, family, location, and chronology, the historical Jesus stands out as a uniquely identifiable figure. This convergence of details lays the groundwork for examining the most widely agreed upon event in his life, the Crucifixion Consensus. Among all events described in ancient sources about Jesus, his crucifixion under Pontius Pilate is the one most consistently affirmed by historians, regardless of their background or beliefs. This consensus rests on several distinct lines of evidence, each reinforcing the others and leaving little room for serious doubt about the event's historicity. Roman execution records Reexamined in 2025 show that crucifixion was not only common, but sharply increased in Judea during Pilate's tenure as prefect from 26 to 36 CE. These records detail a pattern of public executions, particularly during periods of unrest and around major Jewish festivals when the city's population swelled. The Gospel's depiction of Jesus' execution during Passover fits directly into this context. Roman authorities used crucifixion strategically as both punishment and deterrent, especially for those seen as threats to order or as symbols of resistance. Jesus' public teaching, his following, and the charged atmosphere of Passover would have placed him directly in the path of such Roman crackdowns. Physical evidence from Jerusalem tombs further corroborates the prevalence of crucifixion during this era. Archaeologists working in the city have uncovered first-century nails with bone fragments still attached, demonstrating the reality and brutality of Roman crucifixion methods. Forensic analysis confirms these nails were used specifically for affixing victims to wooden crosses, and the trauma scene in the remains matches the descriptions of crucifixion victims, broken legs, wrist injuries, and the like. While no remains have ever been definitively identified as belonging to Jesus himself, these finds confirm that the method described in the Gospels was exactly how executions were carried out in first-century Judea. The presence of wood fragments on the nails matches the Gospel narrative of victims being nailed, not tied, to the cross, which was a less common method. The testimony of Tacitus, a Roman senator and historian writing around 116 CE, stands as a crucial independent source. In his Annals, Tacitus reports that Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus. Tacitus's account is especially valuable because he was not a Christian and had no interest in promoting Christian beliefs. His reference to the execution of Jesus under Pilate and the subsequent rise of the Christian movement in Rome offers confirmation from outside the Christian tradition that Jesus' crucifixion was known and remembered within a generation of the event itself. Historians also point to what is known as the criterion of embarrassment in early Christian sources. Paul's letters, written within a few decades of Jesus' death, openly state that Jesus was crucified, a humiliating and brutal form of execution reserved for the lowest criminals and rebels. In the ancient world, inventing a Messiah who died such a death would have been unthinkable for those seeking to create a convincing religious story. The fact that this detail appears so early and is never glossed over or reimagined in the earliest Christian writings argues strongly for its authenticity. Even the Gospels, written for different audiences, do not shy away from the shame and suffering involved in crucifixion, further indicating that this was a historical reality the early Christians could not ignore or avoid. The convergence of these independent sources, archaeological finds, Roman historical records, and the earliest Christian writings, creates a robust foundation for the crucifixion's historicity. The details align. The method of execution, the authority under which it was carried out, and the timing during a politically charged festival all match what is known from both Roman and Jewish sources about how such events unfolded. Even skeptical scholars who question much else about the gospel narratives accept the crucifixion as a historical event because it is so well attested by multiple unconnected lines of evidence.